When you think of an artist, is this what comes to mind? Miriam Schulman is an artist, but not this kind of artist. She is a successful businesswoman who managed to kill the cliche of the starving artist and grew a profitable business doing what she loves. If you met Miriam 20 years ago, you would find her at the World Trade Center in an Ann Taylor suit, climbing the corporate ladder and working for a hedge fund. After 9/11, she gave up her profitable career in finance to pursue her true passion, art. And today she's here to tell us her secrets for making it as an artist and business owner.
And that is something that's really hard for many people, especially when you're just starting out. You're like, oh, I'm trying to make money. I shouldn't be investing money. But that is really when my business started to take off, is when I had some help with it, because we always think, oh, if I only had more hours in the day, I can get more done. But that's always a lie, because we all have a limited amount of energy and we all have a limited amount of genius time. And we shouldn't be spending that genius time doing things that shouldn't be done by us.
Welcome to The Creator's Adventure, where we interview creators from around the world, hearing their stories about growing a business. Hey everyone, I'm Brian McAnulty, the founder of Heights Platform. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, we're here today with Miriam Schulman. She is an artist, author, and host of the Inspiration Place podcast. She's helped thousands of creatives around the world develop their skill sets and create more time and freedom to do what they love. Her signature coaching program, the Artist Incubator, teaches artists to go from so-so sales to sold-out collections. After witnessing 9/11, she abandoned a lucrative hedge fund to become a full-time, thriving, working artist. Her artworks have been featured in major publications, and her book, Artpreneur, was an instant #1 bestseller for art business books. Miriam, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Brian. It's such an honor to be here.
Yeah, you're welcome. My first question for you is, what would you say is the biggest thing, either that you did or you are doing, that has helped you to achieve the freedom to do what you enjoy?
Okay, I think the #1 thing is hiring help. And that is something that's really hard for many people, especially when you're just starting out. You're like, oh, I'm trying to make money. I shouldn't be investing money. But that is really when my business started to take off, is when I had some help with it, because we always think, oh, if I only had more hours in the day, I can get more done. But that's always a lie, because we all have a limited amount of energy and we all have a limited amount of genius time. And we shouldn't be spending that genius time doing things that shouldn't be done by us. So I would say that would be the one thing.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I feel like that's maybe less of a common answer. I ask everyone this question, and it's less of a common answer than maybe it should be.
Oh, really? I'm curious. What is the most common answer?
I think it's maybe more often around mindset and realizing that you had to shift some certain way of thinking. But I think that is really important.
But it is part of mindset to know.
Yeah, it is.
Like to have the faith that if I invest in a team, that it's going to pay off.
Yeah, I think so. I'm thinking about that for myself, and I feel it was maybe slightly easier for me than it was for some to step into feeling comfortable with having somebody else help me with things. But I think it's also because for my dad was a small business owner. He did sales, and I realized like he was great at like having processes and everything that he did, but he was not great at delegating or having someone help him with those things. And I feel like maybe I realized, I guess, those traits in him, and realized that if I wanted to do certain things, I should learn how to become comfortable with that. So maybe that influence actually helped me become more comfortable with it, even though I knew that he wasn't. But yeah, I think it's really important, and it's not like it was super easy. It still was tough. It's like, oh, what if they're going to do something wrong?
Right. It always is hard, even when I do delegate, is when they do something wrong, like telling them they did it wrong, or there's still things, oh, they don't have time for it. Maybe I should do it. But whenever we're doing stuff like that, then we're becoming our own assistant. And then if you're wondering why you aren't making enough money, it's because you're doing $5 an hour, $10 an hour tasks instead of really focusing on the things that are going to be the big lever pullers in what you can do to build your own business.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, not to stay too long on this, but I realized for myself recently that there were some times when I was being maybe too helpful to my employees. And so they have a problem with something and I know I can fix it. So I was like, okay, I got that. I'll take care of that. And there's certain cases where like that is part of my role and I should be fixing that for them. They really do need that from me. But there's other times where actually they can probably figure it out or whatever they do, it's probably going to be good enough and we can go from there. And so I realized in certain moments like that, I have to make sure I'm giving them the agency to do that. Otherwise, I'm just taking myself out of my zone of genius kind of thing, like you were mentioning earlier.
Yeah.
So we read on your website that your business as an artist started by painting your son in a Batman costume. Can you share the story of how this painting kind of led to the growth of your business?
Okay.
Or
So,
the beginning of your business?
all right. So we're talking about a kid who was 4, who is now 24, by the way. So I've been at this a very long time. But what happened was I had painted my son in his Batman costume because when he was 4 years old, every day he would put it on. He was very proud of the sculpted muscles. And every day after nursery school, he'd put on the Batman costume. And what I did was very strategic as I would put the painting into the hallway so that when my son had play dates, and he was a very social kid, and the moms came to pick up their children, they would see the portrait. And my son was a very good influencer for me. He would tell his friends, look at what my mom did. And the kids thought it was so cool. And the kids would say, look at what Steph's mom painted. So that really helped make my marketing take off. So remember, this is 20 years ago. This is basically, I was doing the IRL version of Facebook and Instagram. I had, but I put it right. And I honestly, Brian, I think that what I did, if you did that today, it's still more effective than putting something on social media and hoping the right person is going to see it at the right time. Like I knew my ideal customers were going to be walking through my front door. So like putting it right there for them to see was very strategic.
Got it. So when did you decide to start teaching online as well, other than like working as an artist on commission work?
Okay, great question. So 20 years ago, as I said, is when I started my portrait business. And then it was a little over 10 years ago. So it was around 2012. So, 12 years ago. Time flies. So 2012, when I was selling art on Etsy, a customer reached out to me and said, I really like your art. Do you teach online? And Brian, I had never heard of online classes back then. So I said, oh, that sounds interesting. Who else? Who's doing this online class thing? And they gave me the name and I thought, okay, I could do that. Because before I became an artist, I was working on Wall Street as a computer programmer. And I thought, this is definitely something that I could do, that I want to do. And yeah, what was the question? How did I start doing that? Or when did I start doing that?
Yeah, how did you start teaching online?
That's how I started. So I had never done anything before like that before, but I had an intern working for me. So this is, again, going back to delegating and hiring help, etc. But this was just a high school student. And I knew that he was filming for his high school. I said, tell me what camera to get. Tell me what software to get. And then I need you to show me how to do like these 3 things on the software. I knew that I needed to cut. I knew I needed to speed up sections and do a voiceover. And so he showed me how to do that. And I had an online class by the next year.
Awesome. So I think it's really interesting that you started like working in a hedge fund and then became an artist. And I think like for myself, I have a background of like, as I was talking about my dad earlier, he was involved in sales. And so I think of myself more as an artist, but I got to have that experience and understanding of of sales and marketing in a way that I think has been really helpful to me, but definitely not the same level of contrast between like hedge fund and artist, I think. So I'm curious in how that helped you approach art, and also like art as a business compared to somebody who's maybe just traditionally starts as an artist
Okay.
first.
So these are like lessons basically from Wall Street that I feel like I use today. Would you say that fair? That's the question. All right.
Yeah.
So one thing that I was told really early on when I was even just interviewing for a job, and this was not a job that I got, but I still remember this. I remember it was JP Morgan, and the guy said to me that it's not so much the money that we lose. It's the money that we lose by not taking the opportunities. In other words, opportunity costs. And that really stayed with me as a really core piece of advice. And that is something that I still recognize now, that oftentimes it is what costs us the most money are those opportunities we don't take. And what I found, Brian, is that the biggest difference between people who are successful and those who aren't successful, both in my world as artists, but also digital marketers and my peers who are teaching other things online, is that successful people are just willing to do things unsuccessful people aren't. And that will mean that you're going to fail at some of them, but you're not going to get those things if you're not trying for them. So that was one piece of advice that really stuck with me. The other piece of advice that I want to give other people, when I was working at my job, the first year I just had my head down and I thought, oh, as long as I do a good job and I'll get a big bonus and people will love me and blah, blah, blah. And that didn't turn out to be true. I put my head down and I worked really hard, but by the end of the year, they really didn't know what I had done. So the following year, I took it upon myself to write a memo every month that basically detailed, this is what I worked on, this is what I got done for you, this is how I improved what's going on around here. And I would give that to my bosses. That's basically like marketing myself to my bosses. So it's kind of like what it doesn't matter if you work for yourself or you work for somebody else. We are all marketing something. And I think that was a very important lesson too. And it's kind of like the nothing sells itself mentality, that we are always having to market and sell whatever it is that we're doing to whoever it is that we need to advance with, whether it's your customers or your boss.
Yeah, excellent advice. So what would you say, because many people believe that a career in art is not really a lucrative one, and then they might want to do that, but then they end up pursuing some other path in life. And I know maybe you had a similar experience, but now you proved that being an artist can be a profitable business. So what would you say are like the key elements of making a profitable art business?
Okay, so many things to I could pick up different threads there. But I too did not believe that I could make a living as an artist. That is why I took the practical route and found myself on Wall Street and at a hedge fund, because I didn't believe it either. There are lots of artists in my community and my peers who are making six figures. They are not the exception. It's available to everyone. But if you want to talk about what the 5 keys are, these are going to be the same 5 keys. And it doesn't matter if you are a traditional artist with a capital A, meaning a painter, a sculptor, a photographer, or if you have a different kind of business, because I know a lot of people in your audience, Brian, have other kinds of businesses. So these 5 Ps, which I wrote about in my book, Artpreneur, do apply to every business. And that is production. What are you producing? Are you producing something that is not a low profit item? For example, artists in my community might make a sticker for sale or a greeting card for sale. People who have small businesses might be trying to sell an ebook for $10. So anything that you're producing that cannot be charged for a higher price, a lot of times that problem can be fixed by just creating something that's more profitable. It's because if you want to make, just pulling a number out, $50,000 a year, it's a lot harder to find 10,000 customers for a $5 product than it is to find 50 customers for a $1,000 product. So that's what production is. It's really, what are you producing? Are you producing something that is profitable? If you were, and even if you're a service-based business, if you were fully booked, would you be getting the income that you want? So it's a math problem. How much you're producing or how much you're offering times what you're charging. Is the problem that you're offering the wrong thing, or is the problem that you're not, the second P, just charging enough for it? So a lot of people think cheaper is easier to sell. It really isn't true. If you think about somebody who has no furniture in their apartment, Brian, what would you guess is the first piece of furniture they're going to buy for their apartment, assuming they have a bed?
A couch?
Yeah, correct. So a couch is, I don't know, a couple $1,000s on West Elm or Pottery Barn, right? Maybe $4,000. Could be a lot more, but it's $4,000. They're not going to start with an end table, even though the end table is a lot cheaper, which is $400. And unfortunately, a lot of people get caught in that thinking that, oh, I'm going to offer something for $400 because it's less money and I'll just make it up in volume. But what people want is what's going to make the biggest impact in their life. So a couch, a piece of art that goes over the couch. Maybe it's a coaching package that's going to really teach them everything they need to know rather than learn this one little thing over here. So, and I'm trying to speak to everybody who's in your community. People are looking for a big transformation, not a small change, not an incremental change. So that's production pricing. The next thing is, who are you going to sell it to? That's prospecting. And how are you promoting or selling it? That's the next P. And the last P is productivity. So we can dial into any of those, but that's an overview of the 5 Ps. And I went into a little more detail on the first 2.
Yeah. So I have some questions about some of them.
Great.
So I think the end table is a great analogy because I'm thinking of that myself. I have some like IKEA end tables somewhere in my house that were like $50. And definitely that's like the lowest priority thing. I feel like it's like, well, if it's going to hold the thing, that's all I need. I don't care how much my end table costs. I don't care what it even looks like. The couch is more important. Everything else around it is more important. And yeah, I've seen creators struggle with this in all kinds of business models, that they're selling something that is it's not really solving a big pain. It's just like, oh, I guess that's nice to have, but the value comparatively is so low, and then they're selling it for a price that is too low. And I think also you talked about, well, okay, we can do the math then. Let's figure out if it's a service or whatever, what would it take to be fully booked, and how much would you make? And it sounds like, okay, that's really simple, but I really believe that there's going to be people listening to this that have overlooked that, because I know I overlooked that.
Oh, I overlooked it too. I mean, reason I have, like I said, I've been at this for 20 years. And I remember going back at least 10 years ago, was before I had online classes. And back then I was really into The Secret and Law of Attraction. And my friend and I were going to talk about how we're going to manifest our stuff. But then I said to her, Glenda, if we were to sell everything we have here, we're not going to make the money we want. Like, we actually went through and did the math. It was like, we either have to create more art or charge more or both. But that math problem, a lot of people don't do. Like, they don't think about, okay, if I'm a website developer and I'm charging $1,000 for a website design, but it takes me all month, and I can only do 12 a year. And I'm not a website designer, so I don't know how long it takes. But my point is you gotta figure out that basic math. It's not calculus.
Yeah, it's not a hard math problem to solve. But we kind of ignore it, because for me it was like 2 years in business, and I was doing okay, and like I wasn't making a ton of money, but I was profitable enough, and so like things were fine. But I didn't really look at it. I didn't really know even how much I was earning. And then when I went and did the math, it was like, oh, okay, well, if I want to grow, like this is what's going to have to change or what's going to have to happen. And it's so obvious, but if you don't solve that problem, then you don't really even know your own numbers. So I think that's definitely a big one. But I'm curious, what would you say to the person then who's listening to this? They say, okay, fine. You're telling me I'm selling something that's too cheap, I'm not going to be able to make enough from that. I'm going to need to get too many customers. What do you say to the person who maybe they are concerned that they can't make something that's worth that higher number, or they're not worth selling something for that higher number?
So many good questions, and there's so many ways I can answer this. The number one thing that you have to know, and by you I mean you who is listening, is that what is going through your customer's mind. It doesn't matter what you're selling. I'm going to use a few examples. Let's say I'm selling a painting for $5,000. So let's say I'm going to try to sell it to Brian. So what's going through Brian's mind is not whether Miriam Schulman's painting, whether my painting is worth $5,000. What's going through Brian's mind is if he is worth spending $5,000 to get a painting that he likes. That's what's going through our customer's mind. And it doesn't matter what you are selling. If you're charging $5,000 for a website, what's going through the customer's mind is not if you, the website designer, is worth $5,000. Is my business worth investing this money in? So it's not about us and our worth. The customer is always worried about themselves and what their self-worth is. And once you step into that empathy, it makes it a lot easier to sell, because if you don't stop worrying about trying to prove to your customer that you're worth it, because that's not what they're worried about. They're worried about if they're worth it. So if I'm selling a coaching program to an artist, they're not trying to decide if I, Miriam Schulman, am worth spending $2,000 on my group coaching program. They're worried if their art isn't good enough to invest in learning how to do the marketing to sell their art. That's what they're worried about. So if you don't understand that, you're going to be making the wrong arguments. And that's actually something I talk about in Artpreneur, is I do have an overcoming objections chart that walks you through like what are the various objections people have and what they really might be thinking about when they present an objection to you. And that does make it easier for you to have those sales conversations and ask for higher prices when you really understand the psychology of what your customer is thinking.
Yeah. There's a lot of times they may say something kind of related to the price, but the price is not the problem.
No, and it's not that they're lying to you necessarily. I mean, they might be. A lot of people will, to get out of it, that'll be their knee-jerk response. It's too expensive. But sometimes they're lying to themselves. Or they're not aware of what it is that their true objection is. So it's always up to us to like uncover that. But you were also asking, I think something else back there, a little slightly nuanced difference, like how do I get them to raise their prices? Is that right? Like if they don't
how can they feel comfortable
it?
With it?
Yeah.
Like I guess even more specifically, like especially that kind of like starving artist mindset.
Yeah.
How can somebody kind of get out of that and embrace a more entrepreneurial mindset?
Okay. So a couple of things that I teach is that, and this is in my book, it's in all my free materials too. Again, this is about the idea about cheaper not being easier to sell. So Brian, do you have pets?
No, not currently.
You don't have a dog? Okay.
I had a lot growing up. I had 4 dogs growing up.
Okay. But I know a lot of our listeners do. And if their fur baby needs something from the vet that's very expensive, they're not shopping around for somebody cheaper. And those vet bills can be very expensive, and you know what I'm talking about. Like it could be a $2,000 procedure. You're not going to go look for the guy who's only charging $100 because you don't trust them. So we think cheaper is easier to sell, but really our customers think there may be something wrong with it if you're not asking enough. And they are looking for something that is known as reassuringly expensive. So the same thing is true for people who buy wine. I know my husband, he just assumes that the $20 bottle of wine is going to get him the level of wine that he wants. He doesn't think that the $10 bottle wine might be just as good, or, no, it's got to be this price range. Our customers think the same way. We're not looking for the cheapest vet. You're not looking for the cheapest plastic surgeon. You're not looking for the cheapest babysitter. If somebody tried to sell you a Rolex watch for $49, you're going to pass on it because you think it's a fake. You probably would pass on a $400 Rolex watch too. Am I right?
Mm-hmm.
So it would be easier to sell a watch for $4,000, a Rolex watch for $4,000 or even $5,000 than it would be for $400 or $49. So we need to look and behave as if we are a Rolex.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's especially important for like the independent, like solopreneur, the artist to not try to compete on price because of like all the reasons you just said. It takes the person like, it makes them lose their trust. Like everyone looks at a specific thing. They're expecting the Rolex is a great analogy because you're expecting to pay a certain range for it. And so something out of that range, I don't know, it's almost not helpful as you said, like you're going into it looking for that range. So if you are a creator selling something in a certain range, just offer it in that range and then compete on something else. And if it's, you say, well, I don't even need that much money. Okay, congratulations. But now you can find something to do with that to serve your customers better, to grow your business faster or something else, right?
Yeah, and we started off talking about the whole mindset, but though what happens is any time you and me, Brian, are asking our clients to do something they don't feel comfortable with, such as raising prices, what's going to happen is when your brain, because our brains have evolved for survival, not goal achievement, whenever our brain feels uncomfortable, we think there must be something dangerous going on here. And your brain's only job is to keep you alive and safe. So if it feels uncomfortable, what's going to happen is you're going to come up with doubts, reasons why you shouldn't do that thing. And they don't feel like excuses because they feel real. Because you're telling yourself these stories that feel real, like, well, I'm just starting out. Nobody pays for that in my town. It's an election year. I can't charge for that. It's a pandemic. I can't charge for that. And I'm sure, Brian, you've heard these same things in your community, like people saying, okay, so you have this brain. It wants to keep you safe. It feels fear. So it comes up with these doubts. The smarter you are and the more creative you are, the better you are at coming up with those stories about why it's a bad idea. So then what happens is that you're either going to just not do the thing because why should you? What you're believing are your reasons make sense. Or maybe you go into procrastinating mode because you don't want to fail and you're going to do all kinds of research to make sure you have all the steps. But then you're going to come across something that's going to make you feel really uncomfortable and you have even more reasons, or you'll get conflicting advice and now you still don't know what to do. So all the procrastinating, what's happened, you have fear that leads to doubt. That's going to lead to confusion and overwhelm. Confusion, just I'm not going to do it, I don't know how, or overwhelm, you do procrastinating. But either way, what you're left with is still not knowing exactly what to do, which leads to procrastination, which leads to feeling shame and guilt because you didn't follow through on your dreams. You didn't do what you said you were going to do.
Yeah. So what do you say to somebody who's listening to all this and they say, okay, it sounds good. I get it. I'm not going to make my prices too low. I know I should be selling myself. I understand that even just as one person, what I do is important to market myself, but I'm an artist or I'm a creator. I don't feel comfortable with the marketing side. I'm not passionate about the marketing side. I'm passionate about my art. What do you say to them? And is there any specific strategy that you would kind of go to or swear by in regards to promoting yourself?
Yeah. So in terms of strategy, unfortunately, there's a lot of us artists who were very, very good at our craft, but we're also introverts because to be good, you have to get into your own world and a little scared of the people. Okay. So, but the thing is, you really have to sell to the people. And in my world, a lot of people, they want to get a gallerist to do it for them, but then you're still down to the same problem, Brian. You're going to have to market yourself to the gallerist to get the gallerist to sell the art for you. And then we also have another set of artists who think that they can just put things on social media. And do you talk on this podcast about the engagement rate on social media? Should we run through those numbers?
Sometimes, yeah. Let's talk about it, because I think it's helpful for people to know. I do see too many people just say, "Oh, they told me I should create content," and you make some random thing, but then nothing happens.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the thing: too many people are creating content instead of customers, but that's a whole different rant. Okay, if you spent all the time you're into creating content, into creating customers, you'd be much more successful. However, let me just go through the numbers, because the numbers don't lie. So the average engagement rate on Instagram is 0.6%. That's not 60%. That's not 6%. That's 0.6%. And Brian, the average engagement rate for an influencer, those people who want to teach us how to build our engagement rate, it's still only 1.2%. So what that means is, out of 1,000 people, if you're average, only 6 out of those 1,000 people are going to engage with you and see what you're talking about. Or if you're really good at it, maybe 12. Now, on email, the average open rate is 24%. Would you agree?
Yeah.
So you only need 100 people on email to get 24 people to engage with you, whereas on Instagram, you would need 4,000 people to get 24 people because of those engagement rates. So if you have a small business, it's a lot easier to promote using email and using email marketing than it is using social media, because you have 100 people versus 4,000 people. So the trick is to move anybody you meet, whether it's in the real world or online, any of your universes, to your email list.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I love to share examples or talk about examples of people who have these great businesses that they're really successful, and their social media is like, who is this person? I've never heard of this person. And like, we think of it the same way. I guess we're like a software company, so it's less of like a more personal brand, but we don't care about our social media followers. We only care about the email list, because the people who buy from us are the people on our email list.
That's right.
And that is what creators should think about and should worry about. Like, if you want to be an influencer and all that, which I think most people listening or watching this right now, that's not what they want to do. They just care about their craft and their passion. Then you actually don't need that many followers on social media.
That's correct.
You just need to find the right people and then get them on your email list.
So I know you want a concrete example. So I have a client, and she's a digital artist, and she started working with me just this year. And a month later, she reported back that she sent an email campaign to a very small list, 168 people. And from the one email campaign she sent to 168 people, she made $2,700. So
that's awesome.
What she loved is she felt like she could take back control of her marketing by using email. Because what I shared about the engagement rates, when you send an email out, your customer is the one, or your prospect is the one, who decides whether or not they're going to open that email. So you have a little bit of control over that. Like, what subject line are you using? Do you write good emails that they want to open again? On social media, the algorithm decides if your potential customer is even going to see it. You don't have any control over that.
Yeah, I completely agree. So in your book, Artpreneur, you name some of these marketing diseases. Can you tell us more about Sleeping Beauty Complex, Rapunzel style marketing, and the painted rock problem?
Okay, so painted rock problem, that's what we touched on earlier. That's somebody who, they want to sell painted rocks. So this is a true story. Somebody emailed me and says, my problem is I paint on rocks and people don't see that as real art. What do I do? I was like, you just told me what your problem is. Like, what else do you want me to say? So painted rock are people who they're trying to make things that are cheap or that nobody really wants anyway. It's a production problem. Rapunzel style marketing is basically waiting for the fish to jump in the boat. It's the whole thing. Art sells itself. That mentality that, if I put up a website or if I put up social media, business will just come in. No, that is the person who's trying to hide, trying to stay safe in the cave. You don't want to talk to the people. I get it. But just waiting for people to come to you is not going to get you what you want. Successful people are willing to do things that unsuccessful people aren't willing to do. So the last one is Sleeping Beauty Complex, and I bet you see this one a lot, Ryan. So the Disney movie Disney story Sleeping Beauty, a little baby is, they find out that there's this terrible curse put on her, that she pricks her finger, she's going to die or fall into sleep or whatever the hell it was. And they whisk her away to the forest. And we don't see the braces, we don't see the pimples, we don't see any of the awkward teenage stage. Next thing we know, she's this gorgeous, tall, willowy blonde, all grown up. Now, this is what I see a lot of people do with their businesses. They don't want to market it while it's still in that awkward teenage stage. But you can't, you have to love your baby and you have to market it even when it's first growing up. You can't wait until it's perfect and all grown up to take it out, because you miss out on all the feedback that you're going to have along the way. My first online class looks a lot different than my last one did. And yours will too. It's okay to be bad at first. It's okay to be awkward. It's okay to go through that stage, but you'll never grow up if you're not willing to go through puberty.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you're right. I do see it a lot. And I think that is such an important one, because it's not only the feedback's one thing, because that's what helps you build the product better to get to the point that it is this ideal perfection. Otherwise, you're not going to get there. But then second is you probably need some customers to help you get there. Otherwise, it's going to take a very, very long time to get it to what is in reality so good that everyone's just going to buy it. And I think maybe there's the delusion or assumption that perfection is only a week or two away, always, not years away. But yeah, you need to get that feedback, and you need to be able to stay in business long enough that you can make it to the level that you want.
Yeah. And all these things that I'm pointing out and talking to you about, it's not like I was perfect and didn't make these mistakes. I know about these problems because I've made all these mistakes. When I was starting my podcast, I kept saying to my business coach, I don't know if it's a good time. It's August. Everyone's away in August. Should I wait? He was like, no, ma'am. How are you going to, first of all, your 10th podcast episode is going to be a lot different than your first one. So you might as well get those first 10 out now. Get them out of the way. And this is how you're going to get some feedback on it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly it. I just want to echo the same thing, because I think that's so important that, I only learned that because I can point to things where I tried to be too much of a perfectionist about it. I waited too long. Nothing happened. And then I realized, I have to just start doing it. I have to just start putting it out there.
Yeah.
Excellent. So I've got two more questions. First is, on the show, I like to have every guest ask a question to our audience. So if you could ask our audience anything, whether something you're curious about, something you want to kind of get everybody thinking about, what would that be?
Okay. I think we Brian, it would be really good for your audience to do that math problem we talked about. If you're a service-based person and you're fully booked times the price you're offering, what does that look like? Will you be making that income you want? If you're a product-based business, can you produce? What can you produce in a week times what those items you're selling it for? Does that math give you the income you're looking for? So I'm giving them a very practical next step to take See what that math gives you.
Yeah, that's a great exercise. I would add that if you say, okay, well, I'm specifically digital products, I don't have to really even make it, then maybe just multiply it by 1,000 because it's hard to get 1,000 customers. And
Well,
is that
if
number
you're a
times 1,000? Is
digital
that
person, it's almost easier. Like, let's just say you use Facebook ads. Like, what is your cost per customer
Yeah,
acquisition? How
Think
much
about
is it
that. That's
costing
good.
you with Facebook ads or whatever it is that you're doing to get that customer? What is your profit on that? Is that going to get you to where you want to go? And you may have to pivot and do something. I found that anytime I try to like give like a splice of my coaching program to sell it for less, it doesn't work for me. People don't want, like we talked about earlier, the little thing that solves a little problem. They want the big thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen similar that we have this really great discount and it's like, oh, they're buying it after the discount ended. It's not as important to lower your price as you think.
No.
So last question is, before we get going, where can people find you online?
Well, if you liked what you heard today, you can drink more of that Kool-Aid over at the Inspiration Place podcast. But I also would love to give you a free chapter from my book, Artpreneur. So it came out January 23 with HarperCollins. Just go to schulmanart.com/believe, and I'll send you chapter 1 absolutely free. And Schulman is SCHULMANART.
Awesome. All right. Thanks so much, Miriam.
All right. Well, thanks for having me.